His hand trembled against hers. Alara's breath caught as Alpha King Theron's fingers wrapped around her wrist, gentle, desperate, nothing like the warrior who'd once conquered kingdoms with a sword. Up here on the castle ramparts, with the sunset bleeding gold across his armor and the wind screaming between the battlements, the most powerful man in the realm was begging. "Please," he rasped, his face so close she could see the gray pallor beneath sun-weathered skin. See death creeping into eyes that once burned like molten gold. "Be my wife. Give me an heir." She should pull away. She should run. But the mate bond roared to life the moment his skin touched hers, a wildfire in her veins, recognition slamming into her chest with enough force to steal her breath. He didn't feel it. Couldn't feel it. And that truth was more terrifying than the proposal itself. If you're gripped by this story, hit subscribe and comment where you're watching from. Let's see how far across the realm this tale reaches. Alara stared at the hand clasping hers. Calloused. Trembling. The hand that had signed peace treaties and held a bloodied sword now held her like she was his last lifeline. Because she was. He just didn't know it. She was nobody. A wandering healer who'd spent years hiding in forgotten villages, burying the healing magic that burned beneath her skin. The magic she'd suppressed since the night fire consumed her childhood and left her with nothing but fragmented memories and a pendant she didn't understand. The royal guard had dragged her up the tower stairs an hour ago. No explanation. Just iron grips and cold silence as they hauled her past whispering courtiers and through torchlit corridors. When they'd shoved her onto this rooftop terrace, she'd expected execution. Not this. Not Theron Ashford, the conqueror, the unbreakable, looking at her with a vulnerability so raw it hurt to witness. "I'm dying," he said, and the words cracked like breaking glass. His other hand came up, hovering near her face but not quite touching, as if afraid she'd disappear. "The healers can do nothing. My bloodline ends with me unless," his jaw clenched. "Unless you agree." The kingdom spread below them, oblivious. Palace lights flickered to life as sunset turned to dusk. Soon his advisors would come looking. Lord Corvus would climb these stairs with poison-sweet words. "A common wanderer? My king, you've lost your senses along with your strength." But here, now, trapped between stone walls and open sky, it was just the two of them. A dying king offering everything to a woman he saw as nothing. And a broken healer staring at her true mate, the one man whose bond could save him, knowing he felt none of it. "Why me?" The words escaped before she could stop them. His golden eyes held hers, and for a heartbeat, she saw something flicker there. Confusion. Recognition trying to surface through whatever curse or poison clouded his senses. Then it was gone. "I don't know," he admitted, and the honesty in his voice nearly broke her. "But when they told me your name, when I caught your scent in the courtyard this morning..." He stopped, shaking his head. "I don't know. I just know it has to be you." The mate bond whispered the truth he couldn't hear. "Because I'm yours. Because we're meant to save each other. Because if you die, part of me dies too." But she couldn't say that. Not yet. Not when everything in his world was falling apart, and she was just another piece of the wreckage. Alara's mind flashed to another hand reaching for her through flames, another voice screaming, "Run, little moon." The last time someone had needed her this desperately, she'd been too weak to save them. Alara had been alone for so long, she'd forgotten what it felt like to be wanted. The memories before the fire were fragments, shadows of faces she couldn't quite grasp, lullabies in a language that felt familiar but foreign, and always that voice, "Run, little moon." Everything before that night was smoke. Everything after was survival. She drifted from village to village, offering her healing skills for scraps of food and shelter. Never staying long enough for questions. Never letting anyone see the strange warmth that sometimes flowed through her palms when she touched the dying, easing pain she had no medical explanation for. Lone wolves were already suspect. Lone wolves with unexplainable gifts were dangerous. The Shadowpine pack had driven her out with stones. The Riverbend clan had called her cursed when she'd healed a child everyone said was beyond saving. After that, she'd learned to hide what she could do, to be forgettable, to survive in the spaces between pack territories where no one looked too closely at a wandering healer with haunted eyes and herb-stained hands. She was tired, bone-deep, soul-weary tired. And when Theron's voice cracked on that rooftop, offering her a place to stop running, something in her chest had already decided before her mind caught up. The palace swallowed her whole. Within an hour of leaving the ramparts, she was drowning in velvet and protocol. Servants measured her for gowns she'd never be comfortable in. A stern-faced woman named Mistress Oren rattled off rules about proper address, table placement, and the 17 different ways a future queen should curtsy. Alara nodded mutely, understanding none of it, feeling the walls close in with every gilded mirror and marble column. Lord Corvus appeared during the second fitting, his smile sharp as cut glass. "How fortunate for you," he said, examining her like livestock at market. "From wandering beggar to queen in a single afternoon. One might wonder what you did to bewitch our dying king." She'd met men like him before, the ones who smiled while planning your destruction. "I did nothing," she said quietly. "He summoned me." I answered. "Indeed." His eyes lingered on her worn boots peeking beneath expensive silk. "And when he dies in a few weeks, widowed queen, what then? Will you rule in his stead? A woman with no name, no pack, no allies?" He leaned closer, voice dropping to a whisper. "Enjoy your borrowed time, healer. Winter is coming for you." The contract ceremony happened at midnight in the throne room. Theron's advisors had argued for delay. Give the Kim time to reconsider. Search for suitable noble candidates. Anything but this hasty farce. But time was the one thing Theron didn't have. He looked worse under the throne room's harsh torchlight. The armor was gone, replaced by formal robes that hung on a frame losing its battle with death. Elder Corrin read the terms in a voice dripping with disapproval. Marriage in name and law, conjugal rights for the purpose of producing an heir, mutual obligation of loyalty until death. Alara would receive the queen's title, protection, and a substantial widow's pension should Theron die before an heir was born. In exchange, she would submit to the king's needs and the kingdom's interests. It was transactional, clinical. Everything a sacred mate bond should never be. "Your hand," Theron said when Corrin finished. Alara stepped forward, heart hammering. This close, she could see the tremor in his fingers as he reached for hers. Could smell the sickness on him, something wrong and unnatural that her healer's instincts screamed wasn't a normal illness. Their palms met. The warmth exploded between them like lightning finding ground. Alara gasped, feeling the mate bond roar to life with such intensity her knees nearly buckled. It wasn't the gentle recognition she'd heard described in old stories. It was wildfire, drowning, coming home, and being torn apart all at once. Every cell in her body screamed mine while magic surged through their joined hands, her healing power responding to his need without her conscious control. Theron's eyes widened. Color flooded his face for the first time since she'd met him. His breathing, which had been labored and shallow all evening, suddenly came easier. The death-gray pallor lifted slightly, and for a heartbeat, she saw the warrior king he must have been before illness ravaged him. "What?" he started, staring at their clasped hands with something between wonder and confusion. Then Elder Corrin was shoving a ceremonial blade between them, demanding they each draw blood for the binding oath, and the moment shattered. Theron released her hand as if burned, and immediately the color began draining from his face again. He swayed slightly, catching himself on the throne's arm. The ceremony continued in a blur. Blood oaths. Spoken vows. A crown of silver placed on her head, lighter than she'd expected, heavier than she could bear. When it was done, Corrin declared them bound before gods and pack, and Alara found herself married to a dying stranger who was somehow her destined mate. The throne room emptied quickly. Advisors fled to their chambers, muttering darkly. Guards returned to their posts, carefully avoiding eye contact with the new queen who still wore a commoner's boots. Only Theron remained, slumped in his throne, staring at the hand that had touched hers. "That warmth," he said finally, voice rough. "You felt it?" Alara nodded, not trusting herself to speak. I've been cold for months, since this sickness started. So cold, I thought I'd never be warm again. His golden eyes met hers, and she saw vulnerability there that terrified her. When you touched me, it stopped. Just for a moment, but it stopped. He rose unsteadily, crossed the space between them, hesitated, then took her hand again. The warmth returned, softer this time but unmistakable. His breathing eased. The pain lines around his eyes smoothed slightly. Alara felt her healing magic flowing into him through their bond, working on instinct to ease his suffering even as exhaustion pulled at her own strength. I don't understand this, Theron whispered. But I hate appearing weak, and you, he paused, struggling with words. Something about you makes this bearable. Makes me feel less like I'm dying alone. You're not alone anymore, Alara heard herself say. You never were. You just couldn't feel me yet. He studied her face in the dying torchlight, and for a moment, she wondered if some part of him recognized the truth. If beneath the sickness clouding his senses, his wolf knew what his mind couldn't grasp. Then a coughing fit seized him, violent enough that blood flecked his lips. The moment broke. He released her hand, waved off her concern, and stumbled toward his chambers, without another word. Alara stood alone in the empty throne room, a silver crown on her head and a dying mate bond in her chest, wondering which would kill her first. The palace conspiracies she could feel gathering like storm clouds, or the slow agony of watching her true mate fade when she held his salvation in her very touch. The whispers started before dawn. Alara woke in the queen's chambers, a gilded cage of silk and mirrors that smelled like the previous occupant's perfume. Theron's mother, she'd been told. Dead 15 years, but her ghost lingered in every carefully preserved detail. Through the heavy doors, servants murmured just loud enough to be heard. Fortune hunter. Convenient timing. Won't last a month. She dressed herself in the simplest gown she could find, fingers clumsy with the complicated lacings. In her old life, she'd worn wool and cotton, things that could be pulled on quickly if she needed to run. This cream-colored monstrosity required engineering. Lady Seraphina arrived during breakfast, sweeping into the chamber like winter given form. Tall, elegant, with silver threading through dark hair and eyes sharp enough to draw blood. She'd been Theron's chief advisor for a decade, Mistress Oren had whispered, brilliant strategist, fiercely loyal, and utterly convinced that Alara was a disaster waiting to happen. Your Majesty. The title dripped with contempt. Seraphina's gaze raked over Alara's crooked lacings and simple braid. The king has requested your presence at the morning council. I'm here to ensure you don't embarrass him further. The council chamber made Alara's skin crawl. 20 nobles sat around an ancient oak table, their combined centuries of bloodlines and political maneuvering radiating like heat. She recognized Lord Corvus immediately, same predatory smile from yesterday, now accompanied by 3 other lords who watched her with similar calculation. Theron sat at the table's head, looking marginally better than last night but still wrong. The warmth from their brief contact had faded, leaving him gray-faced and struggling to focus. When Alara entered, his eyes found hers with something like relief, but he didn't reach for her hand. Propriety, probably. Or maybe he'd convinced himself last night's warmth was fever dream. Gentlemen, Lady Seraphina. Theron's voice carried authority his body couldn't match. My queen will observe today's proceedings. Instruct her as needed. Alara was placed at the table's far end, below visiting merchants and minor pack representatives. The message was clear. She might wear a crown, but she'd earn nothing. They discussed border disputes, trade agreements, harvest projections, matters Alara understood only in fragments. When Lord Corvus suggested redirecting grain stores from outlying villages to strengthen the capital's reserves, she nearly spoke up. Those villages would starve. But Seraphina's warning glare stopped her tongue. The new queen has opinions? Corvus asked, noticing her aborted movement. Do share. I'm certain your extensive experience wandering dirt roads has given you insight into agricultural economics. Heat crawled up Alara's neck. I only thought those villages you mentioned, I've been to some of them. They barely have enough seed for spring planting as it is. How fortunate we have a queen who's toured peasant hovels. Corvus's smile was blade-thin. Perhaps next she can advise us on the finer points of begging. Several nobles chuckled. Theron's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. The discussion moved on, leaving Alara burning with humiliation. The feast that night was worse. Alara found herself seated between a minor lord who ignored her completely and a visiting dignitary who asked pointed questions about her family lineage, questions she couldn't answer. 3 seats down, a cluster of noble ladies whispered behind jeweled fans, their eyes cutting to Alara every few seconds. She recognized the court game being played. Isolate. Humiliate. Wait for her to break. The wine arrived in crystal goblets, deep red and smelling of cherries. Alara reached for hers automatically, grateful for something to do with her shaking hands. Then the scent hit her. Underneath the cherry sweetness, something bitter. Familiar. She'd encountered it twice before in her wandering. Monkshood, diluted enough to pass for spice but concentrated enough to stop a heart within minutes. Her hand froze halfway to her lips. Every eye at the table watched her, waiting. Someone had poisoned her wine, and someone else wanted to see if she'd drink it. Alara set the goblet down carefully, pulse hammering. I don't care for wine, she said quietly. The queen refuses the king's vintage? Lord Corvus raised an eyebrow from across the table. How peculiar. It's tradition to drink the ceremonial toast. I'm certain Her Majesty has her reasons. Theron's voice cut through the murmurs, sharp despite his weakness. He gestured to a servant. Bring her water instead. But Corvus wasn't finished. Unless there's something wrong with the wine? Surely you're not suggesting. I'm suggesting nothing. Alara met his eyes, letting her healer's training steady her voice. I simply prefer water. Though if my lord is concerned about the wine's quality, perhaps he'd like to test mine? Just to ensure its purity. The silence stretched dangerously. Corvus's smile never wavered, but something cold flickered behind his eyes. I wouldn't dream of depriving you, Your Majesty. Then we're agreed. Theron's hand slammed the table hard enough to rattle goblets. Someone remove the queen's wine and bring her water. Now. A servant scurried forward, reaching for Alara's glass. His hand trembled as he lifted it, an old man, weathered face creased with lines that spoke of decades in service. Their eyes met briefly, and Alara saw the warning there. Be careful. Trust no one. The goblet disappeared into the kitchens. Alara knew it would be disposed of quietly. Evidence vanished before anyone could test it. That was how these games worked. Plausible deniability, no proof, just mounting accidents until the inconvenient queen was dead. The feast continued, but Theron's attention kept drifting to her. When she accidentally used the wrong fork and a lady snickered, his glare silenced the table. When Lord Corvus made another veiled insult about common breeding, Theron cut him off mid-sentence with a discussion of trade routes. It was protective, possessive in a way that had nothing to do with politics and everything to do with the bond he couldn't feel but somehow recognized anyway. Later, after the endless dinner finally concluded, Theron found her in the corridor outside her chambers. He looked exhausted, barely upright, but his eyes burned with barely contained fury. Who did it? He demanded without preamble. I don't know what you. The wine. Don't insult me by pretending it wasn't poisoned. I saw your face when you smelled it. I've seen battlefield triage nurses with that exact expression. He gripped her shoulders, and the warmth sparked between them again, weaker than before, but present. Who tried to kill you? I don't know, Alara admitted. But I recognized Monkshood. Someone with access to the kitchens or the serving staff. I'll have them all questioned. Executed, if necessary. No. She caught his wrist. That will only make them more careful next time. Better to let them think I'm lucky or stupid. Give them false confidence. Theron stared at her like seeing someone completely different from the timid healer he'd married. You've done this before. Survived people trying to kill you. It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. Being a lone wolf teaches you to recognize threats quickly. His grip on her shoulders tightened, pulling her closer. The warmth intensified, and she felt her healing magic respond automatically, easing the pain carved into his features. His breathing deepened, color touching his cheeks. "When you're near," he said roughly, "the pain lessens." "I don't understand it, but he stopped, jaw clenching. "I won't let them hurt you. Whatever game they're playing, whatever they think you are, you're under my protection now." The irony nearly broke her. He was protecting his mate without knowing it, responding to instincts he couldn't name. And she was healing him in stolen moments, giving him borrowed strength while poison, she was certain now, continued working through his system. "You should rest," Alara whispered. "You're exhausted. So are you." But he released her, stepping back. The distance immediately cost him. His shoulders sagged, pain creeping back into his expression. "Tomorrow, stay in your chambers. I'll handle the court. Running won't help. Neither will dying." His golden eyes held hers. "Please. Just one day. Let me figure out who's behind this." She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him that hiding would only paint a larger target. But the exhaustion in his voice stopped her. He was barely standing, burning himself out trying to rule while dying, and now adding her protection to burdens already crushing him. "One day," she agreed. He nodded, then turned toward his own chambers. Paused at the threshold. "Alara? That warmth when I touch you. Does it hurt? Drain you?" "No," she lied, feeling the magic's exhaustion in her bones. "It doesn't hurt at all." He disappeared into his rooms, and Alara leaned against her chamber door, crown heavy on her head and death waiting in wine goblets. The palace wanted her gone, and she had no allies, no power, nothing but a mate bond only she could feel, and healing magic she couldn't reveal. In the morning, she'd find out just how far they'd go to destroy her. Master Physician Aldrich didn't believe in miracles, which made witnessing one particularly irritating. He stood outside Theron's chambers 3 days after the poisoned wine incident, reviewing the king's deterioration charts with mounting frustration. Every projection indicated Theron should be bedridden by now, possibly comatose. Instead, the king had attended 2 council meetings and walked the palace grounds yesterday, activities that should have been impossible. The only variable that had changed was her. "Bring the queen," Aldrich ordered a servant. Immediately. Alara arrived wearing a simple green dress and carrying her worn healer's satchel. She'd retrieved it from storage, unable to feel useful without her herbs and tinctures. Aldrich studied her with the clinical detachment of a man who'd spent 40 years cutting open bodies to understand their secrets. "Sit," he commanded, pointing to the chair beside Theron's bed. Theron, who'd been half-dozing, opened his eyes. "Aldrich, what?" "Quiet. This is a medical examination." The physician pulled out parchment and charcoal. "Your Majesty," he addressed Alara with barely concealed skepticism, "please take the king's hand." Alara hesitated, glancing at Theron. His expression was equally confused, but he extended his hand. The moment their fingers touched, the familiar warmth bloomed between them. Theron's labored breathing immediately eased, the gray pallor lifting from his skin like fog burning off in sunlight. Aldrich's charcoal snapped. "Impossible." "What is?" Theron asked, but his voice already sounded stronger. "Your pulse just stabilized. Respiratory rate decreased from 28 to 16 breaths per minute. Skin tone improved." The physician circled them like a predator studying prey. "Release her hand." Theron obeyed reluctantly. Within seconds, his breathing grew labored again, pain creasing his features. Color drained away. "Now take it again." The warmth returned instantly, along with the improvements. Aldrich made frantic notes, muttering calculations under his breath. "The queen is somehow suppressing your symptoms. Or perhaps channeling something. I've never seen." He stopped, eyes narrowing at Alara. "What are you?" "A healer," she said carefully. "I work with herbs, and this isn't herbs. This is something else." Aldrich grabbed her free hand, examining it like a specimen. "Have you always had this effect on the sick?" Alara felt ice spreading through her chest. If she admitted to the healing magic, they'd brand her a witch or worse. If she denied it, Aldrich might forbid her from seeing Theron, accelerating his death. "Sometimes," she said quietly, "people feel better in my presence. I don't understand why." It wasn't quite a lie. Aldrich released her hand with obvious distaste.
"Well,
"Whatever this is, the king benefits from it. I'm prescribing daily sessions, 1 hour minimum with direct contact. Consider it medical treatment." After he left, Alara and Theron sat in awkward silence, her hand still in his. The physical closeness felt different now that it was mandated, medicinal rather than choice. "I'm sorry," Theron finally said. "Being used as medicine can't be pleasant. You're not using me. I want to help."
do you?"
"Or are you trapped here, forced to play nursemaid to a dying king because refusing would make you look cruel?" His golden eyes searched hers with uncomfortable intensity. "You never wanted this marriage. I know that." "You didn't want it either," Alara countered. "You wanted an heir, not a wife." "True." He shifted against the pillows, thumb unconsciously stroking the back of her hand. "But you're here anyway, surviving assassination attempts and council humiliations without complaint. That takes strength most nobles I know don't have." The compliment caught her off guard. Don't say just a healer. I've fought alongside warriors who'd have crumbled under less." His expression softened. "You're stronger than you think, Alara." Something warm and dangerous bloomed in her chest, having nothing to do with magic. She pulled her hand away, suddenly needing distance. "I should prepare some herbs. For your pain." Over the following days, Aldrich's prescription became routine. Alara would arrive each afternoon, bringing tinctures and salves she'd mixed in her chambers. Theron would pretend the hour was medical necessity rather than something he'd begun anticipating. They'd sit together, sometimes in silence, sometimes talking, while her healing magic worked through their joined hands and palace intrigue churned around them. The court noticed, of course. Whispers multiplied. The queen was a witch. She'd enchanted the king. Unnatural forces were at work. Corvus watched their sessions with hooded eyes, calculations spinning behind his pleasant smile. Lady Seraphina's contempt shifted to something colder, recognition that Alara might not be as temporary as assumed. But within the sanctuary of Theron's chambers, politics faded. He told her about his first battle at 16, the terror disguised as courage. About inheriting a fractured kingdom and forging it whole through diplomacy and, when necessary, bloodshed. About the loneliness of being untouchable, the weight of never showing weakness. "My father used to say that kings don't have friends, only allies and enemies," Theron said one afternoon, their hands clasped while rain drummed against windows. "I thought he was being dramatic, but he was right. Everyone wants something, and you can't trust anyone not to take it." "That sounds exhausting," Alara murmured. "It is." He glanced at their joined hands. "But this, whatever this is between us, it's the first time I've felt like someone sees me rather than the crown. Even if you're only here because Aldrich prescribed it." "I'm here because I choose to be," she said, and realized it was true. Their eyes met, and the air between them shifted, charged with something beyond magical warmth. Alara noticed details she'd been avoiding, the way his jaw tightened when he was thinking, the silver threading his dark hair at the temples, the scar cutting through his left eyebrow from some long-ago battle. He was beautiful in the way storms were beautiful, dangerous and compelling, and impossible to look away from. Theron's gaze dropped to her arms, where old scars crisscrossed her skin in patterns she usually hid beneath long sleeves. "Those marks," he said carefully. "How did you get them?" Alara pulled back instinctively, but he caught her wrist, gentle, not restraining. "You don't have to tell me," he added quickly. "But I notice you flinch when people touch you unexpectedly. And you sleep with your back against the wall. I've seen the servants mention it. Someone hurt you badly enough that you're still running from it." The observation was too accurate, too close to wounds she'd buried deep. "It was a long time ago," she deflected. "Pain doesn't care about time." His thumb brushed over a particularly vicious scar on her forearm. "These look like defensive wounds. Like you were protecting yourself from." He stopped, fury suddenly blazing in his eyes. "Who did this to you? A pack I tried to join years ago? They didn't appreciate a lone wolf in their territory. The memory tasted like ash. I survived. That's what matters." "It's not all that matters." Theron's grip tightened fractionally. "You survived people trying to kill you for the crime of being alone, and now you're here watching history repeat itself with poison wine and court conspiracies. Why haven't you run? Because you're my mate, and leaving would kill us both. Because your pain calls to something in my blood that won't let me abandon you. Because for the first time since the fire, I have a reason to stay." But she couldn't say any of that. "Maybe I'm tired of running," she said instead. Something shifted in his expression. Understanding, or perhaps hope. The distance between them suddenly felt smaller, charged with possibility. Alara became hyper-aware of his thumbs still tracing patterns on her wrist, the warmth of his breath, the way his eyes had darkened to molten gold. Then Aldrich burst through the door without knocking, shattering the moment. "My king, there's been," he stopped, noting their proximity. "Am I interrupting?" "Yes," Theron said flatly, not releasing Alara's hand. "Unfortunately, this can't wait. Lord Corvus is demanding an emergency council. Something about grain shipments gone missing and accusations of." Aldrich glanced at Alara uncomfortably. "He's suggesting the Queen might be involved." The accusation was absurd and obviously fabricated, but Alara felt the trap closing anyway. Refused to defend herself, and suspicion would fester. Attend the council, and Corvus would have his stage to destroy her credibility further. Theron stood, still holding her hand. "Then we'll go together. Let Corvus make his accusations to my face." "Theron," she started.
No.
"I'm done watching them circle you like wolves." His smile was sharp and dangerous, the warrior king surfacing beneath the invalid. "Time they remembered who rules this kingdom." As they walked toward the council chamber, hands still joined, Alara realized something had changed between them. The awkwardness had burned away, leaving something more solid. Trust, perhaps. Or the beginning of it. At the chamber doors, Theron paused. "Whatever happens in there, I want you to know that hour we spend together each day. It's not medicine to me. It's the only hour I feel like myself anymore." Before she could respond, he pushed open the doors to face the court's accusations. But Alara carried his words into the hostile chamber like armor, and for the first time since arriving at the palace, she didn't feel quite so alone. The seer arrived on the 7th day, unannounced and unwelcome. Alara was in the gardens attempting to identify which herbs grew in the palace grounds when the servants started whispering. She looked up to find an ancient woman standing at the garden's entrance, leaning on a gnarled staff that looked older than the palace itself. Milky white eyes fixed on Alara with unnerving precision despite obvious blindness. "So," the woman's voice cracked like breaking ice, "the lost moon has finally come home." Before Alara could respond, guards surrounded them. The seer, Grandmother Mira, the servants called her, hadn't been to court in 5 years, not since she'd predicted the drought that nearly starved the northern territories. Her visions were legendary, her presence rarely benign. Theron arrived within minutes, looking stronger than he had in weeks thanks to their daily sessions. "Grandmother," he greeted her with cautious respect. "We weren't expecting you. The moon doesn't ask permission to rise, boy." Myra's staff thumped against stone. "I came because the realm screams with imbalance. A king dying while his cure stands beside him, too blind to see what fate has given." The air seemed to thicken. Alara felt something ancient and powerful radiating from the old woman, magic that made her own healing gift feel like a candle beside a bonfire. "What are you talking about?" Theron demanded. Myra's laugh was humorless. "Bring me to your throne room. This truth requires witnesses, lest they claim an old woman's ravings when the storm comes." Within the hour, the court assembled with barely concealed irritation. Lord Corvus wore his perpetual smile, but his eyes tracked Mira with obvious calculation. Lady Seraphina looked openly hostile. The other nobles muttered about superstitious nonsense and wasted time. Mira stood before Theron's throne, Alara positioned awkwardly to the side. The seer's staff struck the floor 3 times, and the room fell silent with almost supernatural abruptness. "I see what you cannot," Mira began, those white eyes somehow looking directly at Theron. "A king poisoned by those he trusts, dying while his salvation stands an arm's length away. A queen who carries ancient blood and doesn't know her own name. And a bond." Her voice rose, power crackling through the words, "a true mate bond, sacred and rare, that connects them so deeply her very presence keeps death at bay." The court erupted. Shocked gasps. Angry denials. Theron went rigid in his throne. "That's impossible." Lady Seraphina cut through the chaos. "The king would have recognized his mate immediately. The bond is instantaneous, unmistakable. Under normal circumstances, yes." Mira turned toward Alara, and those blind eyes seemed to see straight through her. But the girl's nature is veiled. Trauma, perhaps, or magic laid upon her as a child to hide what she is. The bond exists, but he cannot feel it fully. Only she carries its weight. Alara's knees nearly buckled. The healing sessions, the unexplained warmth, the way her magic responded to his pain. It wasn't just healing ability. It was the mate bond trying to save him despite being unrecognized. "This is madness," Corvus interjected smoothly. "The seer grows old and confused. Surely we're not going to restructure palace politics based on—" "Touch her," Mira commanded Theron, ignoring Corvus completely. "Truly touch her, skin to skin, and open yourself to what you've been denying." Theron descended from his throne slowly, moving like a man approaching an execution. When he reached Alara, his hand trembled as he raised it to her face. She felt his hesitation, his fear that this was either trick or truth, neither of which he was prepared to handle. His palm cupped her cheek. The warmth exploded between them with 10 times its usual intensity. Theron gasped, golden eyes going wide as something inside him clearly shifted, recognized, claimed. Alara felt the bond surge in response, no longer one-sided but flowing both directions, his wolf finally sensing what hers had known from the beginning. "Mine," Theron breathed, the word torn from him involuntarily. His other hand came up to frame her face, pulling her closer with desperate certainty. "You're mine. How did I not? Why couldn't I?" "The veil," Mira said quietly. "Whatever hides her true nature also muffled your recognition. But proximity and repeated contact have weakened it. The bond fights to complete itself." Theron looked shattered, angry, and awed all at once. "I married my mate like she was a business transaction. Offered her money and protection like she was—" He stopped, jaw clenching. "Gods, Alara, I'm sorry." The court watched in stunned silence. Even Corvus's smile had finally slipped. "This changes nothing," Seraphina declared, though her voice lacked its usual conviction. "Mate bond or not, she's still unsuitable. No family, no lineage, no." "She's the king's true mate," Mira interrupted. "That makes her more suitable than any noble daughter you could produce. The realm recognizes what you refuse to see." The meeting dissolved into chaos. Nobles arguing, guards trying to restore order, servants fleeing to spread gossip. Through it all, Theron never released Alara's face, staring at her like seeing someone completely different from who he'd imagined. "I need to speak with my wife," he said, the possessive emphasis on wife cutting through the noise. "Alone. Everyone out." The throne room emptied reluctantly. Mira was the last to leave, pausing beside Alara long enough to whisper, "The veil will break soon, child. When it does, remember who you were before the fire taught you to hide." Then they were alone, standing in a space that suddenly felt too large and too small simultaneously. "Why didn't you tell me?" Theron asked, hands still cradling her face. "I didn't know for certain. Not until just now." Alara's voice cracked. "I felt the bond immediately, but you didn't, and I thought, maybe I was wrong. Maybe it was just healing magic. Maybe I was desperate enough to imagine. You've been healing me through a one-sided mate bond for over a week." Horror and admiration warred in his expression. "That should have killed you. The strain of channeling that much power without reciprocation. Alara, You could have died. So could you. She finally let herself touch him back, hands resting against his chest where his heart hammered. You were dying. Are dying, still, from whatever poison is in your system. What was I supposed to do? Watch my mate fade and do nothing? I'm not worth your life. That's not your decision to make. They stared at each other, the bond humming between them now that both could feel it. Theron's expression shifted, vulnerability bleeding through the warrior king mask he wore so carefully. My father beat weakness out of me, he said abruptly. Literally. Every time I cried as a child, showed fear, needed comfort, he'd have me whipped. Said kings who showed emotion were kings who got overthrown. His thumb stroked her cheekbone, touch reverent. I learned to bury everything. Became so good at it, I buried the ability to feel the mate bond fate gave me.
I'm sorry.
I'm so. Alara caught his hand, pressed it harder against her face. I hid too. After the fire after. She stopped, the memories rising like floodwater. I remember running. Someone screaming, run, little moon. Fire everywhere. Hands pushing me toward darkness. Then nothing until I woke up alone, and every time I tried to remember before that night, my head would split with pain. The veil, Theron murmured. Someone magical suppressed your memories. Hid your identity. To protect me, maybe. Or to make sure I stayed lost. She met his eyes, letting him see the fear she usually buried. I don't know who I was before I became Alara, the wandering healer. Don't know if I'm worthy of being anyone's mate, let alone a king's. Stop. The command was gentle but absolute. I married you thinking you were common and still felt drawn to you. Felt safe with you in ways I've never felt safe with anyone. That's not about worthiness. That's about you being exactly who you're meant to be. The words cracked something open inside her. Tears burned behind her eyes, threatening to spill. Theron pulled her closer, wrapping her in an embrace that felt like coming home and falling apart simultaneously. We're both broken, he whispered against her hair. Both hiding from ourselves. But maybe together we're less broken. Maybe that's what the mate bond means. Alara let herself sink into him, feeling the bond settle into place with rightness that made her chest ache. For the first time since the fire stole her childhood, she wasn't alone, wasn't hiding, wasn't running. They stood like that until sunset painted the throne room in amber light, two damaged people learning to be whole. The answer came in the form of ash. Aldrich spread the contents of the porcelain bowl across his work table, gray flakes and dried residue from the last batch of medication given to Theron. The king's blood samples lay beside it, dark and sluggish in glass vials that caught the candlelight. Alara watched the physician work, the smell of burnt herbs and metal thick in the air. You said the pain worsens after these drafts, she reminded him quietly. And his fever spikes a few hours later. Aldrich grunted, grinding the ash with a stone pestle.
Yes.
Which means either we've been treating the wrong illness, or we've been helping it along. He added a drop of clear reagent. The mixture hissed, turning a sickly green before darkening to black. Alara's stomach dropped. Shadowbane, she whispered. It has to be. The color change, the burn pattern, I've seen it before in a border town. Someone poisoned the local alpha. Took months to kill him, and everyone thought it was a wasting sickness until he coughed black foam. Aldrich's jaw tightened. I was afraid you'd say that. Shadowbane mimics natural decline. Hard to detect, harder to trace. And the dosage here, he glanced at the vials.
Small. Precise.
Someone has been feeding him this for months. Someone with access to his food, medicines, or wine, Alara said. Someone inside the palace. They looked at each other, the weight of it settling like a storm cloud. We need proof, Aldrich said. This reagent reaction will convince some, but the court will demand more than an old man's word and a wandering healer's experience. Then we start with patterns, Alara replied. When his symptoms worsened. Who was present? What he ate? What he drank? She hesitated. And we stop giving him anything we don't prepare ourselves. Aldrich didn't argue. The next council meeting crackled with tension. Theron sat straighter than usual, bolstered by their daily bond sessions and Alera's careful detoxifying teas. He still looked ill, but there was steel in his posture that hadn't been there in weeks. "Your Majesty," Lord Corvus began smoothly, "rumors are spreading among the outer packs. They say the new queen is interfering with your treatment, that she's banned trusted physicians from administering medicine." "I authorize those changes," Theron replied. "New information suggests my previous treatments were compromised." "Compromise?" Corvus's brows rose. "By whom?" "Our loyal staff, the healers who have served your family for generations." His gaze slid to Alera. "Or by recent additions to the court who benefit from keeping you isolated and dependent." The implication was clear. Several nobles murmured agreement. Alera kept her expression neutral, hands folded in her lap, so no one could see them tremble. "Shadowbane has been found in the king's medical ash," she said evenly. "A rare toxin, administered in small doses over time. It mimics natural illness but eventually shuts down organs. If we hadn't caught it." "Shadowbane," Corvus repeated, voice full of theatrical horror. "How convenient that such a discovery appears after the Queen takes an interest in His Majesty's health. Almost as if someone wanted an excuse to seize control of his treatment." "Enough," Theron snapped. Alera risked her life identifying the toxin. "Someone tried to poison her with monkshood at the last feast. You think it's coincidence the same week we discover I've been poisoned as well?" Corvus's smile thinned. "I think, my king, that fear makes men see enemies everywhere. We must be cautious about whom we trust, especially when that trust is new." The room tasted of iron and suspicion. In the days that followed, suspicion spread like mold. Servants were interrogated, kitchen staff replaced, wine casks destroyed and reordered from distant allies. No one caught with poison, no confession wrested from terrified lips. Whoever had orchestrated the Shadowbane dosing knew how to cover their tracks. At night, when palace shadows grew long and the corridors emptied, Alera's dreams turned violent. She woke gasping from the first one, heart slamming against her ribs.
Fire.
Always fire. A grand hall with banners of midnight blue and silver hanging from the rafters, flames devouring them in hungrily rising sheets. Wolves howled in panic. Somewhere, a woman whose face looked too much like Alera's screamed, "Run, little moon." In her hand, the woman clutched a pendant shaped like a crescent biting into a full circle, an eclipse. The symbol burned brighter than the flames around it. Alera sat up in bed, breath ragged. Her palm ached, as if she'd been holding the pendant herself. The second dream came 2 nights later. A courtyard of black stone under a blood-red sky, bodies scattered like broken dolls. That same woman knelt beside a child, Alera as a little girl, she realized, with tears streaking soot on her cheeks. "Remember this," the woman whispered, pressing the eclipse pendant into the child's hand. "Remember who you are when they try to make you forget. Run, little moon," she added, voice raw. "Don't look back." Alera woke with the taste of smoke in her mouth. She found charcoal and parchment before the images could fade completely and sketched the symbol from memory, a dark circle bitten by a silver crescent. The lines came easily, like something her hand already knew. She was still studying the drawing when a soft gasp sounded from the doorway. Old Mara, one of the palace's longest-serving maids, stood frozen with a tray in her hands. Tea sloshed in the pot, forgotten. Her eyes were locked on the parchment. "Where did you see that?" Mara whispered. "In a dream," Alera replied slowly.
"Why?"
"What is it?" Mara set the tray down with shaking hands and reached for the parchment like it might vanish. "I haven't seen this mark since." Her voice trailed off. "Eclipse moon." The name hummed in the air, resonating in Alera's bones. "You've heard of them," Alera guessed. "Everyone of my generation has." Mara's eyes shone with unshed tears. "They were royalty before your king's line rose. Not above, not below, another branch. The Eclipse Moon Pack ruled the Eastern Territories.
Wise.
Powerful. Marked with this symbol." Her finger traced the eclipse. "They say their bloodline carried a rare gift, healers and visionaries. Like you." What happened to them? Massacre. Mara's voice went thin. 20 years ago, their stronghold burned in a single night. No survivors, they said. The king at the time, Theron's father, absorbed their lands. Called it a tragedy. Some whispered it was convenient. Alara's skin prickled. No survivors? Rumors of a child, smuggled out through a servant's passage, Mara admitted. But no proof. Just stories old women tell when they're angry at taxes. Her gaze returned to the drawing. Until now. Seed planted. Could Alara be that child? She thought of the fire dreams. Of the woman calling her little moon. Of the pendant pressed into a small hand. Of the veil grandmother Mira had mentioned, hiding her true nature. If this symbol belonged to Eclipse Moon, Alara said carefully, and I'm dreaming about it. Mara's eyes widened. You look like her, you know. The last Luna of Eclipse Moon. I served there as a girl before being assigned to this palace. Your face, it's older, harder, but the eyes. She shook her head, crossing herself in the old way. Gods above. If Corvus finds out. Corvus. Alara's heart stuttered. He was there that night, Mara whispered. His family's guards stood beside the king's forces when the stronghold burned. He would have a great deal to lose if anyone proved Eclipse Moon's heir survived. Lands to return. Crimes to answer for. The puzzle pieces began aligning with sickening clarity. A dying king with no heir. A queen who might carry a rival royal bloodline. A noble whose power depended on those lands staying absorbed and the truth buried. Shadowbane was subtle. Monkshood in a single goblet, less so. Someone was getting impatient. Alara folded the parchment and hid it under her mattress. You didn't see that drawing, she told Mara. You never heard my dreams. For your safety. For both our safety, Mara agreed. Be careful, child. The last moon that rose over this palace disappeared in smoke. That night, Alara sat with Theron in his chambers, their hands intertwined. She didn't tell him about Eclipse Moon yet. She needed more than dreams and an old servant's memories. But she watched him differently, understanding that their fates were knotted together by more than a mate bond. You're quiet, Theron said, studying her face. Quieter than usual. Just thinking. About what? About how many enemies can hide behind smiles. She glanced at their joined hands, watching her magic pulse through his veins, fighting Shadowbane in ways Aldrich's remedies couldn't. About how easy it is to erase a family from history if no one survives to remember them. Theron's expression darkened. If someone thinks they can erase you, they're about to learn how wrong they are. He spoke about himself, but Alara heard the echo of something larger. Echoes of burned banners, vanished bloodlines, and a symbol drawn in charcoal that refused to stop humming beneath her skin. Alara found the truth in a place the court had forgotten existed. The palace kept its oldest servants below ground, in narrow stone quarters that smelled of soap, old wool, and the faint bitterness of liniment. Mara led her there after nightfall, a candle trembling in the older woman's hand as they descended a staircase worn hollow by generations of footsteps. She doesn't come upstairs anymore, Mara whispered. Legs aren't what they were. But her mind. The maid tapped her temple. Sharp as broken glass. They stopped at a door bound with iron bands. Mara knocked twice in a pattern that felt like a memory tugging at the back of Alara's mind. A voice from within, dry as parchment, called, "If you've brought me more gossip and less tea, go away." Mara pushed the door open. "I've brought something better than tea, Lisa. I've brought a ghost." The woman inside the cramped room was impossibly old, skin like creased parchment, hair gone to snow, eyes cloudy but not blind. She sat in a rocking chair with a blanket over her knees and a cane within easy reach. When her gaze landed on Alara, the world seemed to stop. "Moon," Lisa breathed. Her hand flew to her chest. "Gods have mercy. They didn't get you after all." Alara's heart stuttered. "You know me?" "Know you?" Lisa laughed, a sound that broke halfway to a sob. "I used to chase you through the Eclipse Moon Gardens when you refused to take your naps. Princess Alara Moonwhisper, terror of the Eastern Towers. You'd hide in your beds and come back covered in dirt, insisting you were a healer, like your mother. The room tilted. Alara grabbed the back of a chair to steady herself. That can't be right. I don't. My name is just Alara. I don't remember. Because they took your memories, Lisa said gently. They had to. It was the only way to keep you alive. Heat roared through Alara's veins, not from magic this time, but from the terrible, exhilarating possibility that the hollow inside her might finally have a shape. Tell me. Lisa nodded, eyes shining. Sit, child. This won't be easy. Alara sank onto the stool opposite her. Mara hovered near the door, as if guarding the conversation from the world above. It was 20 years ago, Lisa began. You were 5. The eclipse moon's stronghold stood then. Black stone, banners of midnight and silver, wolves on the walls. Your mother, Lunaceris, was the finest healer the Pax had seen in generations. Your father, Alpha Kale, ruled with strength and mercy. Too much mercy, some said. Corvus's father among them, Mara added quietly. Lisa nodded. Lord Varian Corvus wanted those lands, those trade routes. He whispered poison into the High King's ear about Eclipse Moon hoarding power, about secret magic, about treason. Some of it might even have been true. Your mother did have secrets, but not the kind they accused her of. Alara's hand went instinctively to the pendant at her throat, the simple crescent and circle necklace she'd worn as long as she could remember. It had always felt like part of her, weighty despite its small size. On the night of the massacre, Lisa continued, they came under cover of celebration. Your parents hosted a delegation from the capital. Varian Corvus came too, smiling with that same false charm his son wears now. They brought wine, gifts, compliments. And at midnight, they brought fire. The flicker of the candle threw shadows across the walls, turning the cramped room into a distorted echo of Alara's nightmares. I remember fire, Alara whispered. Screaming. Someone shouting, run, little moon. That was your mother. Lisa's voice broke. When the first explosion shook the east tower, she knew. She grabbed you from your bed, wrapped you in a cloak, and pushed this into your hand. The old woman pointed at the pendant. Royal sigil of Eclipse Moon. Proof of who you are. Alara unclasped the necklace with shaking fingers and laid it on Lisa's blanket. The old servant touched it reverently, then pressed a hidden catch Alara had never noticed. The pendant unfolded like a blooming flower, revealing an inner ring etched with tiny runes. Bloodline marker, Lisa said. Old magic. Only those of Eclipse Moon blood can wear it without burning. She looked up. Has it ever harmed you?
No.
Alara's voice was barely audible. It warms sometimes. When I'm afraid. Or when I heal. Then there's no doubt. Tears spilled down the old woman's cheeks. You are Princess Alara Moonwhisper. The last of your line. The words settled over Alara like a cloak she wasn't sure she could bear.
Princess.
Bloodline.
Last.
What happened after my mother gave me this? She asked. She dragged you toward the servants' passage behind the apothecary, Lisa said. I was there. I was supposed to take you out the back in trance, get you to the forest, run for the northern Pax who still owed your family loyalty. But as we reached the passage, Varian's men blocked the main door. Your mother knew we wouldn't make it if they sensed your power. Lisa's eyes closed, remembering. She knelt in front of you, cupped your face, and called on old magic. Memory binding. Painful, dangerous, but quick. She sealed away your past, names, faces, everything except one instinct, to run when told. Then she kissed your forehead and said, Run, little moon. When the time is right, the sky will remember you. Alara's breath hitched. The phrase that had haunted every nightmare wasn't a random echo. It was a spell, a mother's last gift. I took you, Lisa continued, blind and sobbing, with smoke already choking the corridors. We got you through a servant's gate with the help of a guard who died buying us time. I carried you until my legs gave out. When we reached the border village, you didn't know your own name. You only clutched that pendant and screamed if anyone tried to take it. How did I end up alone? I was hurt, Lisa said simply. Smoke in my lungs, a wound in my side. I left you with a healer I trusted while I went to find medicine. When I came back, both of you were gone. No sign of struggle, no bodies. Just an empty hut and a pendant-shaped burn on the table where someone had tried to remove your necklace. Her gaze dropped. I thought they'd taken you. That you died with the rest. I grieved you like a daughter. A strange calm settled over Alara. Puzzle pieces clicked into place with devastating clarity. The gaps in her memory, the instinct to run, the way healing came as naturally as breathing. Corvus's family was part of it, she said. It wasn't a question. They led the second wave, Lisa confirmed. The one that hunted survivors. If anyone proves the Eclipse Moon heir lives, every land grant, every treaty, every advantage they gained from that night becomes blood-stained currency. There would be trials, seizures, maybe worse. Alara exhaled slowly. Then Shadowbane isn't just about killing Theron. It's about making sure no one ever connects me to that night. A dead king. A widowed queen of unknown origin. Easy to erase. Mara crossed herself again. If they knew who you were, they'd never have let you into this palace. Fate has a twisted sense of humor, Lisa muttered. Hiding the last eclipse moon inside the very den of those who betrayed her family. Alara picked up the pendant. It felt heavier now that she knew what it meant. What do I do with this? With any of this? You survive, Lisa said firmly. You protect that king of yours. Whether you forgive his father's sins or not is your choice, but Theron is not Varian. And you decide when, how, and to whom your truth is revealed. Do not let Corvus control that moment. Telling Theron was the hardest part. He listened in silence as Alara recounted Lisa's story in his private chambers, the pendant open in her palm so he could see the runes glow faintly in response to her touch. He turned it over carefully, recognizing old magic when he saw it. My father participated in that massacre, he said at last. Maybe even ordered it. The records are vague, but I always suspected the official story was sanitized. I never knew a child survived. You didn't know Shadowbane was killing you either, Alara pointed out softly. Ignorance doesn't erase the blood, but it does matter. He closed her fingers around the pendant, then covered her hand with his own. The bond hummed between them, not gentle now but fierce, protective. So my common healer, Queen, is actually displaced royalty, he said, attempting a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. That explains why you boss the palace herbs around like they belong to you. Does it complicate things? She asked. My claim. My blood. The fact that some will say I have more right to this throne than you. You are my mate, he replied without hesitation. That outranks blood and politics. He hesitated, the first crack in his composure showing. But yes, it complicates things. Corvus will panic if he learns the truth. He'll move faster.
Get sloppier.
More dangerous. Then we use that, Alara said. The certainty surprised even her. We let him keep underestimating me. Let him see only the healer wife, while we gather proof. When he's overplayed his hand, that's when we reveal who I am. Theron studied her, something like pride softening his features. You realize that every instinct I have is screaming to hide you in some distant safe house until this is over. Every instinct I have is screaming that running didn't save me last time, she countered. I'm done hiding while other people burn for decisions I didn't make. He huffed a breath that was almost a laugh. This is going to be a problem. What is? My urge to lock you away in a tower versus my respect for the fact that you could probably set the tower on fire to escape. His thumb brushed her knuckles. I won't cage you, Alara. Not after what you've survived. But I reserve the right to worry myself sick while you insist on walking into danger beside me. Compromise accepted, she said, surprising them both. He tugged her closer until their foreheads touched, breath mingling. Princess Alara Moonwhisper, he murmured, tasting the name.
Healer. Mate. Queen.
Whatever blood runs in your veins, I'm not letting this kingdom, or Corvus, take you from me. For the first time, the title didn't feel like a weight. It felt like a weapon, a shield, a piece of herself restored. Alara closed her fingers around the eclipse moon pendant and felt it warm against her skin, as if recognizing that its lost moon had finally found her place, not in hiding, not in exile, but standing at the side of a king who was learning, painfully, what it meant to share power. Above them, in some other part of the palace, Corvus plotted to keep his family's sins buried. Below, in a forgotten room, an old servant whispered prayers for a bloodline she thought extinct. In the middle of it all, Alara stood between past and future, fire and healing, knowing that when her name finally echoed through the court, it would change everything. The first attack came with roses. Theron had ordered the royal gardeners to reopen the south garden for her, a sheltered space of climbing vines and stone benches that had been neglected since his mother's death. Alara walked the paths with a basket on her arm, fingers brushing leaves, mind half on the herbs she might coax from this soil, half on the weight of the eclipse moon pendant against her throat. She didn't see the assassin until the roses bled. A shadow detached from the trellis as she passed, steel flashing in the corner of her eye. Instinct moved faster than thought. Alara dropped the basket and pivoted, grabbing the attacking arm at the wrist. Her body remembered what her mind had forgotten, eclipse moon training drilled into children of the bloodline. She twisted, driving her elbow into the assailant's throat. The knife missed her ribs by a breath, slicing fabric instead of flesh. They went down hard. Gravel tore at her knees. The assassin recovered quickly, knife swinging toward her face. Alara caught his forearm with both hands, using his momentum to roll them. He hit the ground with a grunt. She slammed his wrist against the stone edge of a flower bed until the blade clattered free. By the time guards arrived, swords drawn, Alara had a knee in the man's back and his arm twisted at an angle that promised pain if he moved. Her breath came fast but controlled. The world narrowed to the thunder of her heart and the familiar, terrifying clarity of combat. One of the guards stared. "Your Majesty, where did you learn?" "I don't know," she said honestly, voice shaking only after the danger had passed. "Maybe I've always known." Words spread quickly. By evening, half the palace was whispering about the queen who disarmed an assassin with her bare hands. Some dismissed it as exaggeration. Others looked at Alara with new eyes, some with respect, some with wariness. The second attempt was less subtle. She was crossing the covered bridge between the library and the eastern tower when hands grabbed her from behind, a cloth pressed over her mouth. The sweet, cloying scent of soporific herbs filled her nose. Alara bit down hard on the hand covering her face, tasting blood. The man cursed, grip loosening just enough for her to drive her heel into his knee. He staggered but didn't release her. Another figure stepped from the shadows, a hood masking his face. "Don't fight, Your Majesty," he said calmly. "It will be easier if you sleep." Alara's vision blurred at the edges. The drug was strong. Some part of her noted the mix: poppy, dream leaf, something metallic. She reached for her magic, forcing her lungs to pull in air despite the cloth, slowing the poison spread. Then a roar shook the bridge. Theron hit the first kidnapper like a storm given flesh. One moment the man stood behind Alara, the next he was slammed into the stone wall, forearm bent at an angle arms were never meant to bend. Bone cracked. The second attacker drew a blade, but the king was already moving, fury overriding sickness. He disarmed the man in 2 swift motions, sending the knife skittering across the stones. "Touch her again," Theron snarled, "and I will take your hands." Guards poured onto the bridge, drawn by the commotion. The attackers were dragged away, one screaming, the other silent. Alara sagged against the railing, the world tilting. Theron caught her before she fell. "Easy," he murmured, pulling the cloth from her face.
Breathe.
"Look at me." The mate bond surged, her magic latching onto his presence like a lifeline. The drug's fog receded, burned away by the warmth between them. She focused on his eyes, golden, furious, terrified. "You came," she whispered. "I felt," he shook his head, still holding her tight. "I don't know what I felt." Panic.
Rage.
The bond pulling so hard, I nearly collapsed before I started running. His hand framed her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. "They will not take you from me." The bridge was still crowded, but in that moment the world blurred at the edges. He was close enough that she could feel his breath on her lips, see the faint stubble along his jaw, smell leather and steel, and the lingering sharpness of battle sweat. "Theron," she breathed. He leaned in, just enough that their foreheads touched. "I came to this bridge thinking I was going to find your body," he said, voice raw. "Do you know what that did to me?" She didn't trust her voice, so she let the bond answer, pushing reassurance, gratitude, a fierce, stubborn refusal to die. Their noses brushed. For a heartbeat, it would have been so easy to close the last inch between them. A guard cleared his throat. "Your Majesties." The moment shattered. Theron stepped back, though his hand lingered on her shoulder longer than necessary. "Escort the Queen to her chambers," he ordered. "Double the watch on every entrance. I want the names of every man on duty tonight." The bridge emptied in a flurry of armor and apologies. Alara walked between guards, heart still pounding for reasons that had nothing to do with the kidnapping. After that night, the palace chose sides. Some nobles began bowing lower when Alara entered a room, their glances holding genuine respect rather than obligation. Word of her healing the king and fighting for her own life had reached even the most jaded ears. Others drifted more openly toward Corvus, murmuring about a queen who brought chaos and danger in her wake. Corvus himself adjusted his strategy. The snide comments faded, replaced by oily politeness and calculated concern. "The court is worried for your safety, Your Majesty," he told her one afternoon. "Perhaps if you refrained from moving about unescorted, the attacks would cease." "They will cease when the people behind them are rotting in cells," she replied. "Restricting my movements only rewards their attempts." His smile didn't falter. Bold words from someone so newly arrived to power. She met his gaze steadily. "I've been surviving other people's attempts to control me my whole life. You are not new, Lord Corvus. Just better dressed." Theron watched that exchange from the dais, pride flickering behind his controlled expression. Later, when they were alone, he said, "You realize you just painted a larger target on your back." "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe I showed the court I won't be cowed. People follow strength." "You're not supposed to be the one drawing fire," he muttered. "That's my job." "Too late. We're bonded. They can't hit you without aiming at me." The argument ended when he dragged a hand through his hair and sighed. "If you're going to insist on putting yourself in danger, you're going to learn how to defend yourself properly. No more relying on instinct." "Properly how?" He sent for Captain Rail, commander of the Royal Guard. Training began at dawn in the inner courtyard, away from prying noble eyes. Rail was a mountain of a man with scars crossing his forearms and a quiet respect in his eyes that hadn't been there when they'd first met. He put her through basic drills, stance, weight distribution, break falls. Her muscles remembered faster than they should have, eclipse moon conditioning surfacing with each repetition. "You've had training," Rail observed after she executed a particularly clean disarm. "Old school, not palace style." "It seems my body remembers things my mind doesn't," she answered. He didn't push. Instead, he adapted, adding advanced techniques slowly. Knife defense, joint locks, how to turn an opponent's weight against them. Alara woke each morning sore and bruised, and went to bed each night feeling more like herself than she ever had. Between sessions, she divided her time between the library and the war room. Old histories of Eclipse Moon filled some of the gaps Lisa's story had left. Accounts of their healing magic used on battlefields, treaties they'd brokered, the jealousy they'd inspired. In the war room, she watched Theron strategize, absorbing the political landscape like another battlefield map. Servants began obeying her without looking to Theron first. She corrected supply chains, rerouted medicine to villages that had been quietly neglected, ordered more guards to patrol the servant corridors where she'd once slept on cold stone. The first time a steward argued, she raised a brow and said, "Is there a reason you're ignoring your queen?" He stammered an apology and scrambled to obey. Respect, she realized, wasn't given because of titles. It was earned by acting like you deserved it. Through it all, the bond between her and Theron deepened. Their daily healing sessions shifted from necessity to ritual, equal parts medicine and confession. They shared stories, some painful, some absurd. He told her about falling off a horse as a boy and refusing to cry until he broke his arm. She told him about a village where the elders argued for 3 hours over the proper way to season soup. Sometimes they argued about risk,
About trust.
about how much to reveal and when. But even their fights felt like proof of something solid, two people pushing against each other not to break, but to find balance. The night it finally happened was quiet, almost ordinary. Theron had had a rare good day, no fever spikes, no coughing fits, just a dull ache that Alara's magic eased more easily than before. They sat by his bedroom hearth, fire casting golden light over his features. Her head rested against his shoulder, their fingers intertwined. The closeness felt natural now, as essential as breathing. "You scare me," he said suddenly. She lifted her head. "That's not encouraging." He smiled faintly. "You scare me because every time you walk into a room, I care more about your safety than my own. Because the thought of losing you is worse than the thought of losing this throne. Because I married you as a bargain and somewhere along the way, the terms changed and I don't remember agreeing but God's. Alara, I don't want my life without you in it." Her throat closed around any clever response. "You were never just a bargain to me," he finished quietly. The last of her defenses slipped. All the fear, the longing, the constant tightness in her chest loosened under the weight of his honesty. She reached up, fingers brushing his jaw, feeling the slight roughness of stubble. "You were never just a king to me," she answered. This time, when their mouths met, there were no interruptions. No guards clearing throats, no assassins leaping from shadows. Just the two of them, and a bond that had been pulling them together since the moment his hand first closed around hers on the ramparts. The kiss was not urgent at first. It was slow, exploratory, an unspoken conversation. "Thank you. I'm here. I'm not leaving." When he cupped her face and deepened it, the warmth between them flared, magic and desire twining until she couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. They moved together with a tenderness that surprised them both. Theron treated her like something precious, not fragile, aware of her strength, reverent of her scars. She traced history across his skin, fingers lingering on old wounds, honoring the boy who'd learned too early that pain meant survival. After, they lay tangled in sheets and moonlight, his heartbeat steady under her ear. The mate bond pulsed contentment, a low hum that settled into her bones. "I don't know what tomorrow brings," he murmured into her hair. "Poison. Coups. Corvus's schemes. Your bloodline revelations. But tonight," his arms tightened around her. "Tonight, I'm allowed to be just a man in love with his mate." Alara closed her eyes, letting the words anchor her. Outside, threats sharpened their blades and plotted their moves. Inside, for a few stolen hours, she allowed herself to believe that love and strength together might be enough to face what was coming. The coup began with music. Flutes and drums echoed through the great hall, banners of silver and black draped from the rafters to honor the old alliance between Theron's line and the northern Pax. Alara stood at his side on the dais, eclipse moon pendant resting against the hollow of her throat, feeling the quiet buzz of the mate bond beneath the polite roar of the crowd. Theron's hand brushed hers, a small, grounding touch no one else seemed to notice. For a moment, it almost felt like the kingdom was healing. Then the doors blew inward. The music snapped off mid-note as a wave of armed men poured into the hall. Too many for a simple disturbance, armor unmarked by any pack insignia. Not palace guards. Mercenaries. Their leader shoved a bleeding sentry aside and raised his sword. "For Lord Corvus," he shouted. Chaos detonated. Tables overturned. Guests screamed. Some guards rushed to defend the dais. Others hesitated, then stepped back, revealing Corvus's bribes written in their inaction. Alara's stomach lurched as she saw familiar uniforms standing still while blades flashed around them. Theron moved before she could. He shoved her behind him, drawing the ceremonial sword he'd worn more for tradition than war. It looked too heavy for a man still fighting Shadowbane, but he wielded it with the efficiency of someone who'd lived more of his life on battlefields than thrones. "Get her out," he roared at Captain Rail. Alara grabbed his arm. "I'm not leaving you." "Not a debate," he snapped, eyes never leaving the advancing mercenaries. "You're their real target now that they know who you are." The first wave hit. Steel clashed against steel. Rail stepped in front of Alara, parrying a blow meant for her head, while Theron met two attackers at once, teeth bared in a snarl. The mate bond flooded with his battle rage, his determination, his bone-deep refusal to surrender what was his. A mercenary broke through the line, lunging straight for Alara. Training took over. She sidestepped, catching his arm and slamming her elbow into his throat, just as she'd done in the Rose Garden. He choked, momentarily stunned, and Rail finished him with a clean strike. "Your Majesty, we need to fall back," Rail said. "Too many compromised guards. They had help inside." "Then we cut the rod out at the root," Theron growled. As if summoned, Corvus appeared at the far end of the hall, flanked by a contingent of guards whose loyalty was suddenly very clear. He wore no armor, only rich dark velvet and an expression of wounded concern. "My king," he called over the din, "this is madness. Foreign agents have infiltrated the palace." "Spare me," Theron snarled. "You bought them." Corvus's smile sharpened. "Believe what you wish. History will remember. I try to save you." He raised his hand. More mercenaries surged in from side doors. Someone inside had mapped the hall's weaknesses, coordinated entry points, timed everything to the ceremony when protocol forbade weapons on most of the guests.
Clever. Cowardly.
Effective. A blade slipped past Theron's guard. Alara saw the flash of steel a heartbeat too late. The mercenary aimed for her, but Theron shifted, taking the blow meant for her side. The sword bit deep into his ribs. The world narrowed to the wet sound of metal leaving flesh and the way his face went white with pain. "Theron," she screamed. He stayed upright long enough to ram his own sword through the attacker's chest, then staggered. Blood spilled down his side, dark and frighteningly fast. The mate bond shrieked, flooding her with a shock, his stubborn refusal to fall. Rail caught him as his knees buckled. "We have to get him out now." Alara pressed her hands to the wound, magic flaring instinctively. Heat surged through her veins, desperate and wild, slowing the bleeding but not stopping it. Shadowbane still coiled in his system, making healing harder, each breath more fragile than the last. Around them, the hall fractured. Some guards rallied to defend their king and queen. Others joined the mercenaries, turning on their own comrades. Guests fled or fought with whatever they could grab: knives, chair legs, bare fists. Corvus advanced slowly through the chaos, somehow untouched by the fighting. When he reached the base of the dais, two mercenaries moved to strike Alara. He lifted a hand, and they stepped back. "Enough," he said. "For now." Rail stiffened. "My lord, stand down or what?" Corvus's eyes gleamed. "You'll bleed for a king who won't live to see dawn?" He addressed Alara directly, voice almost gentle. "Your Majesty. Or should I say Princess Moonwhisper? Yes, I know. Did you really think you could dig in the palace's graveyard without disturbing the bones?" Fear clawed at her throat, but anger burned hotter. "You poisoned him. You burned my family. How many kings do you plan to kill before you're satisfied?" Corvus's expression didn't flicker. "Your father was a threat to the realm's stability. Your mate is a dying man clinging to a throne he can no longer hold. I am simply correcting history's mistakes." He took a step closer, boots leaving bloody footprints on the marble. "Here are your choices. Come with me now, quietly. I'll see you settled in a small, comfortable estate far from here. No more assassination attempts, no more politics. You live. These people remember you as a tragic queen who disappeared after her husband's death." "And if I refuse?" Alara asked. "Then you die tonight with a failed king," Corvus said, voice almost sad. "I blame foreign agitators, the same phantom enemies who supposedly poisoned him. The nobles rally behind me as protector of the realm until a suitable puppet can be found to wear the crown. He glanced at Theron, now barely conscious in Rael's arms, blood seeping through Alara's fingers. Make no mistake, Your Majesty. He doesn't see another sunrise either way. The only variable here is you. The words hit her deepest scars, the part of her that had always believed she wasn't enough. That running was the only way to survive. That staying meant burning with everyone else. She heard other voices beneath Corvus's. Her mother's, run, little moon. Not hide forever. Run so you can come back when it matters. Lisa's, when the time is right, the sky will remember you. Myra's, you are not common. You are veiled. Theron's whispered in the dark. You are never just a bargain to me. All the people who had believed she was more than a shadow. All the lives already lost because others had chosen fear over courage. She looked at Corvus and saw a man who had built his power on ashes, eclipse moons, and now Theron's. Walking away would mean letting him do it again. It would mean proving her darkest fear true, that when it mattered, she chose survival over everyone else. The thought made something inside her snap. No, Alara said. The single word rang clearer than any battle horn. Corvus's brows rose. No. She rose slowly from where she'd been kneeling over Theron, blood on her hands, magic still humming in her veins. The hall quieted, not completely, but enough that faces turned toward her. Loyal guards, frightened servants, even some mercenaries hesitated, sensing the shift. I am Alara Moonwhisper, she said, voice gaining strength with every syllable. Heir of Eclipse Moon. Mate of the Alpha King. Luna Queen of this realm. And I will not let you destroy what good people have built just so you can sit on a throne made of bones. The pendant at her throat warmed, runes pulsing faintly. The mate bond surged in agreement, Theron's remaining consciousness brushing hers with pride and fierce love. Rael moved to stand at her side. For the king, he said quietly. And the queen. Several guards stepped forward to join them. Not all, too many pockets of corruption remained, but enough to form a line between the dais and the invaders. Corvus's smile vanished. You are outnumbered, and your king is dying. Do not martyr yourself for a lost cause. Funny, Alara replied. People said the same thing to my mother. And yet here I am. Strategy clicked into place, her mind mapping the hall like a battlefield.
Doors. Choke points.
The positions of loyal versus bot guards. The weaknesses in the mercenaries' armor, cheap straps at the joints, mismatched pieces indicating different previous owners. Rael, she said quietly, eyes never leaving Corvus. We push them back toward the north entrance. That corridor narrows. Their numbers become useless. Have archers on the balconies pick off anyone who tries to flank us. Rael blinked, then nodded sharply. You heard your queen, he shouted. Form a wedge around the dais. Drive them north. The loyal guards moved with renewed purpose. Guests who'd been cowering behind overturned tables saw the shift and joined, some grabbing discarded weapons, others arming themselves with chair legs and serving knives. Corvus snarled. Stop them. Kill anyone who stands with the king. The battle that followed was brutal and personal. Alara fought at the front, not behind. Training and buried Eclipse Moon instincts guided her movements, twisting, sidestepping, turning larger opponents' weight against them. She used her size as an advantage, slipping into gaps, striking where armor didn't cover. When a young guard hesitated, she caught his eye. On my left, she ordered. Shield high. Watch their legs. He obeyed, confidence bolstered by the fact that the queen bled and fought beside him instead of hiding. Theron lay behind the line, propped against the dais, Rael having dragged him to relative safety while still barking orders. Alara felt him through the bond, fading, but hanging on stubbornly, lending her what strength he could. At one point, a mercenary broke through and lunged for Theron's exposed throat. Alara intercepted him, fury giving her speed she didn't know she possessed. She knocked his blade aside and drove her own stolen knife up under his ribs. Warm blood spilled over her hand. "This is your last chance," Corvus shouted as bodies piled near the north doors. "Stand down, Alara. I will still offer you exile. You don't have to die for him." She met his gaze across the carnage. "I'm not dying for him," she said. "I'm living for us. For everyone you've hurt, and everyone you still plan to hurt." Then she saw it, a hesitation in Corvus's line, a cluster of mercenaries glancing at each other, uneasy. Their employer's confidence was cracking. Their promised quick victory had become a drawn-out slaughter against opponents who refused to fall. "Now," she shouted. "Push." The wedge formation tightened. They drove the mercenaries back into the corridor, where numbers meant less and skill meant more. Archers on the balconies, loyal to the crown, not Corvus's coin, released volleys that thinned the enemy ranks. Corvus realized, too late, that the tide had turned. He backed toward a side passage, eyes calculating escape routes. Alara saw the movement and started after him, but another wave of mercenaries blocked her path. By the time they fell, Corvus was gone, vanished into the palace's veins like poison seeking a new place to strike. The doors to the north corridor slammed shut on the last of the mercenaries. Rail shouted for them to be secured and barricaded. The hall fell into an eerie, ragged quiet broken only by moans and the clatter of dropped weapons. Alara turned back to the dais. Theron slumped where they'd left him, skin ashen, breath shallow. The wound still bled sluggishly, Shadowbane fighting every stitch of her earlier work. She dropped to her knees beside him, hands already glowing with the inner warmth of her magic. "Stay with me," she whispered, pressing her palms to his side. "I didn't just start a war with Corvus to have you die on me now." His eyes fluttered open, unfocused but stubborn. "Bossy," he rasped. Relief nearly knocked her flat. "Someone has to be." She poured everything she had into him, Eclipse Moon healing, mate bond, raw will. Around them, guards secured the hall, survivors tended the wounded, whispers rose about the queen who had declared herself heir of a lost bloodline and stood against a traitor lord. Alara ignored it all, focused on the man whose life had become entwined with hers long before either of them understood why. "I will not run," she told herself, the bond, the pendant, the ghosts of her past. Not this time. Not ever again. If Corvus wanted a realm built on fear and erasure, he would have to go through Alara Moonwhisper first. And this time, the little moon was not running into the dark alone. Corvus didn't flee far enough. They found him in the old war tower at dawn, standing before the cracked map table like a man rehearsing history to make himself the hero instead of the villain. The room smelled of dust and cold stone, shutters thrown wide to let in a gray, unforgiving light. He didn't turn when Alara entered, though the guard's boots on the stairs were hardly subtle. "So," he said, tracing a finger over the carved outline of the kingdom, "the little moon rose after all." Alara dismissed the guards with a nod. Rail hesitated, then stepped back just beyond the threshold, close enough to intervene, far enough to honor her choice. Corvus finally faced her. No velvet today, only hardened leather and a sword at his hip, as if he'd dressed for the role he was about to lose. "You've caused quite a mess," he observed. "Mercenaries dead. Loyal guards injured. The great hall stained in ways even magic won't scrub clean. You hired men to slaughter my mate and seize his throne," Alara replied. "I'd call that the mess. And yet the king still breathes." Corvus's eyes glittered. For the moment, rage burned hot, but she kept her voice steady. "He breathes because he's stronger than you planned for. Because people you thought would break chose to stand with him. Because you underestimated what a common healer could do." He moved around the table, posture relaxed but eyes sharp. "You want justice. I understand. But think, Alara. If you kill me now, my allies call it a purge. They rally in my name. Civil war follows. More blood for your conscience." "I don't need to kill you," she said. "I just need you to stop." He laughed softly. "You still believe power can be wielded without blood. That's why your father fell. That's why Theron will fall, with or without my help." The words cut, but they also clarified something inside her. She stepped away from the wall, meeting him in the center of the tower. No dais, no court, just two people and the consequences of their choices. "You're wrong," she said. "My parents fell because they underestimated how far men like you would go. I won't make the same mistake." He saw the decision in her eyes and smiled, drawing his sword. Then let history repeat itself. One more moon whisper bleeding on stone. She didn't reach for a weapon at first. She shifted into a fighting stance Rael had drilled into her bones. Weight centered, knees loose, hands open. Corvus was taller, broader, trained in the polished style of noble sons. His first swing came in high and heavy, meant to intimidate. She ducked under it, feeling the rush of wind as steel cut the air above her head. He was stronger. She'd known that. But strength without purpose was just force. She had something sharper. He pressed, blows coming faster. She gave ground, not from fear but calculation, drawing him away from the door, away from the stairs where his hidden allies might still be lurking. Each strike he made was precise, but predictable. He fought like someone who'd always been the most dangerous man in the room. "You can't win," he panted between blows. "You have healer's hands, not a killer's." She caught his wrist on the next swing, twisting the way Rael had taught her. Pain flashed across Corvus's face as his fingers spasmed, nearly dropping the sword. "I have hands that know how to save," she said. "That doesn't mean they can't stop you." He surged forward, shoulder catching her in the ribs. Pain flared. They crashed against the map table, carved wood biting into her hips. His blade came dangerously close, pressing against the side of her throat. "Last chance," he whispered, breath hot with effort. "Walk away. Pretend you never knew the truth. Live a comfortable lie until age takes you instead of men like me." Terrified, fragile Alara, the girl alone in border villages, the orphan with no name, would have taken that deal. The woman standing here, who had held Theron's life between her hands and watched a kingdom rally when she refused to run, could not. "I'm done walking away," she said. She slammed her knee into his thigh, then pivoted, using his weight and their proximity to spin them. The sword scraped her skin as it slid, but the angle shifted. They hit the table again, this time with her driving his arm down. Old Eclipse Moon training surfaced fully now, her mother's voice in her muscles, Lisa's stories in her bones. She wrenched, leveraging his momentum. His sword clattered to the floor. Corvus reached for her throat with his free hand, but she caught his fingers, twisting them back until joints screamed. He dropped to one knee. For the first time, she saw real fear in his eyes, not of death, but of losing everything he'd built on other people's corpses. "Do it," he hissed. "Strike the killing blow. Prove you're no different from the rest of us." The pendant at her throat pulsed warm, as if in warning. She remembered fire. She remembered her mother's hands on her face, not to push her into vengeance, but to push her toward survival. To something better. "No," Alara said. She kicked his fallen sword farther away, then released his hand and stepped back. "I won't become what you are. The realm doesn't need another monster wearing a crown." Boots thundered on the stairs. Rael and a squad of loyal guards flooded the room, weapons drawn. They took in the scene in a heartbeat. Corvus on his knees, Alara standing firm, unarmed but unbroken. "By order of the king and queen," Rael declared, "Lord Corvus is under arrest for treason, attempted regicide, and conspiracy against the realm." Corvus snarled, lunging for Alara's ankle in a last, desperate grab. She sidestepped easily. Rael's men slammed him to the floor, shackles biting into his wrists. For the first time since she'd met him, Lord Corvus looked small. "It won't matter," he spat as they dragged him past her. "The people need strength. When your king dies, they'll tear you apart." Alara held his gaze. "Then I'll make sure he doesn't." They took him away. The tower seemed to exhale. Only then did she let herself run. Theron lay in the same chamber where she'd first been forced to sit by his bedside, only now the smell of blood and herbs was almost overwhelming. Aldrich hovered nearby, face grim, hands stained crimson. Assistants hurried to and fro, but their expressions told the truth. Science, and steel had done all they could. When Alara burst in, Aldrich looked up, eyes tired. "He's slipping," the physician said quietly. "Whatever you're going to do, do it now." Theron's skin was cold under her fingertips, breath shallow and ragged. The wound at his side oozed sluggishly despite bandages. Shadowbane still poisoned his blood, but something else pressed at the edge of her awareness. The mate bond, stretched thin, refusing to break.
"Everyone out," she said.
Aldrich hesitated. "Your Majesty, I must monitor." "Out," she repeated, voice leaving no space for argument. They left. The door thudded shut, leaving only the two of them and the soft creak of the bed as she climbed up beside him. She took his hand in both of hers, pressing it over the eclipse moon pendant. "Theron," she whispered, "you don't get to leave me now." No answer. The bond flickered weakly, like a candle in wind. She closed her eyes and reached deep, not just into the well of her healing magic, but into everything that made her who she was. Eclipse moon blood. A mother's sacrifice. A father's mercy. Years of survival in the shadows. Every moment of laughter and pain she'd shared with the man lying dying beneath her hands. "I am Alara Moonwhisper," she said, voice shaking but strong. "Heir of Eclipse Moon. Mate to the Alpha King. By blood, by bond, by every thread of fate that brought us here, I call what is mine back from the edge." The pendant flared hot, runes blazing bright. Light spilled from beneath Theron's hand, searing but not burning. Matching symbols, eclipsed moons, bloomed on both their skin, one on her wrist, one over his heart, glowing with the same fierce light. The mate bond roared to life. Power surged through her, not gentle this time but tidal, ripping a path through Shadowbane's poison, cleansing as it went. She felt Theron's pain, his fear, his stubborn grip on life, and beneath it all, his love for her, raw and unguarded. She poured herself into the cracks, sealing them with magic and will. "Stay," she ordered through the bond. "With me. With our people. We're not done yet." For a heartbeat, nothing changed. Then he inhaled. The breath was deep and shuddering, dragging air into lungs that had been barely functioning. Color flooded his cheeks, slow but undeniable. The wound at his side knit visibly under her hands, blood flow stopping as new tissue formed. The glowing eclipse on his chest pulsed once, twice, then settled into a soft, steady hum in time with his heartbeat. His eyes opened. "Alara," he rasped. She laughed, a shaky, tear-filled sound. "You took your time." "Was arguing with death," he managed. "Stubborn bastard. Of course you were." The door burst open as Aldrich, unable to obey completely, rushed back in, dragging members of the court with him. They froze at the sight, king and queen on the bed, eclipse symbols still faintly glowing, wound all but vanished. By sunset, the story had already grown into legend. They held the ceremony in the great hall, now scrubbed of blood and draped in new banners, Theron's wolf sigil beside the eclipse moon pendant, equal height, equal honor. Grandmother Mira officiated, eyes bright with unspoken visions. Nobles filled the hall, some chastened, some newly loyal, all very aware of which side had survived. Alara stood in front of the throne, dressed in deep midnight blue embroidered with silver crescents. The crown they placed upon her head was not the one worn by queens before. It was reforged, combining pieces from both bloodlines. Theron held her hand as Mira spoke. "By bond and by blood, by choice and by fate," the seer intoned, "we recognize Alara Moonwhisper Ashford as Luna, queen of this realm. May she rule with the strength of the sun wolf and the wisdom of the eclipse moon." Applause swelled, hesitant at first, then genuine as people rose to their feet. Alara looked out over them and saw not just fear, but hope. She saw the steward she'd corrected on supply lines, the young guard she'd coached in the hall, Mara, crying silently near the servants' entrance, Lisa, sitting in an honored chair for the first time in decades. She saw a kingdom ready to try something new. Justice followed quickly. Corvus's trial was public and thorough, evidence of bribes, poison supply chains, Shadowbane procurement laid bare. Witnesses testified. Some of his allies turned on him to save themselves. Theron and Alera presided together, making it clear that this was rule of law, not personal vengeance. When sentence was passed, life imprisonment in the northern fortress, stripped of title and lands, some wanted his execution instead. Alera stood firm. "We do not build a future on more secret graves," she said. "Let him live with what he's done. Let others see that even a lord can fall and still be judged fairly." In the months that followed, the palace changed. Where there had been fear, there was cautious openness. Alera established healing houses in each major territory, staffed by trained medics and, when they could be found, gifted healers like herself who'd once hidden in the shadows. She personally inspected the first one in the poorest quarter of the capital, kneeling beside a feverish child and showing his mother how to brew the herbs properly. "Queens don't usually do this," the woman whispered. "They do now," Alera said. Theron restructured the guard, promoting those who'd stood firm during the coup and dismissing those whose loyalty was to coin rather than crown. He put Rael in charge of a new unit tasked with rooting out corruption, answerable to both king and queen. At councils, Alera spoke and was listened to. Some nobles still bristled, but enough had seen her bleed for the realm that their objections grew quieter. When disputes arose, she weighed compassion against practicality, remembering her parents' mistakes without repeating them. Through it all, she and Theron grew into their partnership, the rough edges sanding down, the trust deepening. They still argued, often and loudly, but always with the understanding that they were on the same side. The epilogue began on a quiet morning. Alera stood again on the ramparts where it had all started, wind tugging at her braid, sunrise spilling gold over the battlements. Her hand rested on her still flat stomach, the knowledge inside her as bright and fragile as the dawn. Theron found her there, as he always seemed to when she needed him. His armor was gone, replaced by simple leathers. The eclipse mark over his heart had faded to a pale outline, but she could feel its hum whenever she touched him. "You're up early," he said, coming to stand beside her. "So are you. King business." He paused. "Mate business." She turned to face him. Their eyes met, and understanding flickered between them through the bond. She didn't need to say it out loud, but she wanted to. "I'm pregnant," she said. Emotion crashed through the bond. Shock, joy, terror, overwhelming love. His eyes went wide, then wet. For a heartbeat, he looked like the same man who had once knelt before her on these stones, begging for an heir with desperation in every line of his body. Only now, the desperation was gone. Theron reached for her hand, not shaking, not pleading, but steady. "Alera," he whispered. "We did it backwards, didn't we? Bargain first, love second, heir last." "It seems to have worked out," she said, throat tight. He laughed, pulling her into his arms. "Please be my wife and give me an heir," he murmured against her hair, echoing his own past words with a smile. "Except this time, I'm not begging a stranger. I'm asking my equal." She leaned back enough to look at him fully. "You already have both." Below them, the kingdom stirred awake, market stalls opening, guards changing shifts, temple bells ringing the hour. Life, stubborn and ordinary and precious, went on. Alera laced her fingers with his. "True strength isn't never falling," she said softly. "It's choosing to stand back up, over and over, even when everything in you wants to stay down. And true love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone whose imperfections fit perfectly with yours," Theron finished. They stood together on the ramparts, not a dying king and a desperate bargain anymore, but a mated pair who had chosen each other in blood and fire and quiet mornings. Above them, the sun climbed higher, and somewhere in the back of Alera's mind, her mother's voice finally changed. "Not run, little moon, this time. Shine."